Hello, dear listener. I am grateful you are here with me today. Please subscribe so you can stay close for the next story and tell me in the comments which city or country you are listening from. It always touches my heart to see how far these moments reach. Enjoy the listen. She stands in the half-lit room listening to the faint hum of early morning traffic, as if the world outside is gently calling her back to life. She has not slept, she rarely does these days, but her eyes are steady, her heart strangely calm in the way a heart becomes when it has survived too much to fear anything anymore. Her name is Elise, and this moment, the one where she watches the first thin line of dawn sneak through the blinds, is the moment she tells herself again that her story is not over. Not finished, not broken, beyond repair. She repeats it softly, not out loud, but inside the quiet sanctuary of her mind, where no one can twist her truth again. She whispers, "You are still here." Outside the old apartment building, the city stretches awake, but Elise feels as though she is waking for the first time after years of surviving, not living. She walks slowly toward the small table by the window, her fingers brushing the edges of the chair she never sits in, because it reminds her too much of nights she wants to forget. She stands instead, looking past her reflection in the glass and into the horizon, where the sky shifts from pale gray to soft gold. She closes her eyes, feeling warmth touch her skin, as if the sun itself is trying to give her courage. This morning is different. She can feel it in her bones, like a quiet shift, a breath of freedom, a small pulse of bravery rising from somewhere deep inside. Perhaps it began last night when she finally packed a small bag and placed her documents inside, or maybe it began years ago with that first small thought that she deserved more than pain, more than silence, more than the quiet terror that lived inside her like a second heartbeat. She does not know the exact moment her spirit cracked open, but she knows it is open now, wide enough for hope to slip through. She sits on the edge of the bed, hands trembling, but steady enough to tie her shoes. She used to move carefully, quietly, gracefully, as if afraid that even her footsteps would anger him. She learned to live like a shadow, blending into corners, shrinking, her voice softening her dreams. But today her movements are slow, deliberate, grounded. She ties her shoes not with fear, but with intention. She stands, she breathes, she whispers again, "You are still here." In the hallway, she pauses, listening for any sound, even though she knows he is not home. He has been gone since last night, returning late morning or afternoon, depending on his mood and the weight of whatever anger he carries with him. She cannot predict him, she never could. That unpredictability is what shaped her silence, what carved fear into her bones. But this morning she is not thinking of fear, she is thinking of leaving, really leaving, not the imagined kind where she thinks about running but stops herself from stepping out the door. This time, she is not stopping. This time she moves. Her hand reaches for the doorknob, and for a moment the world seems to hold its breath. She feels her own breath tighten, then release. Her fingers curl around the cool metal, and she turns it slowly. The door opens, and she steps into the hallway with a calm she does not fully understand. She closes the door behind her, not gently, not carefully, but firmly, letting the click echo like a quiet declaration. She walks down the stairwell, one step at a time, her heartbeat steady, her mind clear. The air smells of old paint and dust and faint cigarette smoke from the neighbor 2 floors down. She has walked these stairs for years, but today they feel different. The same steps, the same walls, the same chipped railing, but with each step she feels her past fall away like sand shaken from a cloth. Outside the building, the morning air wraps around her, cool, fresh, alive. She inhales deeply, as though breathing for the first time. She looks at the street, the buses, the trees, the strangers heading to work, and for the first time in a very long time, she does not feel invisible. She feels present, rooted right here in this moment. Her hand tightens around the strap of her small bag. She begins walking, not rushing, not looking back, just walking forward with a slow, determined rhythm. The streets of the city open before her like a new chapter waiting to be written. She heads toward the train station, unsure of what she will do next, but certain she cannot stay where she was. She has no grand plan, no perfect escape, no carefully mapped future. She has something smaller, but far more powerful. She has a beginning, and sometimes beginnings arrive quietly, without fanfare, without drama, just a woman walking down the street, breathing for the first time in years. At the platform, she stands among strangers, each lost in their own world. She watches the train approach, its headlights cutting through the soft morning haze. She feels her heartbeat rise, not in fear, but in anticipation. The train slows, doors slide open, and Elise steps inside. Choosing a seat by the window, she rests her forehead lightly against the cool glass, watching the station drift away, and with it the life she is finally leaving behind. As the train moves, she allows her thoughts to unfold like petals opening after a long winter. She remembers the early days of her relationship, when love felt warm and safe, when promises felt real, when she believed his devotion came from tenderness, not control. She remembers how slowly things changed, how soft requests became demands, how concern became accusations, how love twisted into something sharp she did not understand until she was already drowning in it. She remembers the night she realized she was no longer living, but surviving, the night she hid in the bathroom hoping he would fall asleep before anger turned into violence. She closes her eyes as the memories pass through her, not overwhelming, but distant like scenes from a life she no longer claims. She touches the small bruise just above her rib, the last mark he ever left on her, and she whispers softly, not to him, not to the past, but to herself, never again. She lets the words settle inside her like an anchor. The train slows at the next station, and Elise steps off into a part of the city she has never explored. She walks until she sees a small park with benches scattered beneath tall trees, sunlight filtering through the leaves. She sits on a bench, feeling the gentle wind brush her hair. Children laugh in the distance, dogs chase each other, people walk by carrying coffee bags, books, life unfolding in its simple, everyday rhythm. She watches quietly, realizing how long it has been since she felt safe in open spaces. She lets the moment hold her, letting breath move in and out slowly. She feels something stirring inside, something tender and unfamiliar, the feeling of possibility. She takes out her phone, opens the browser, and searches for words she never allowed herself to type before. How to start over, how to find support, how to rebuild life after leaving an abusive partner. Pages of resources appear: helpline, shelters, organizations dedicated to helping survivors. Her eyes blur with tears, not of sadness, but of relief. She is not alone, not hopeless, not invisible. There is a world ready to meet her where she is. She clicks on a number for a women's support center, hesitating for only a moment before pressing call. A gentle voice answers, and Elisa's throat tightens. She almost hangs up, almost retreats back into silence, but she forces herself to speak, her voice soft, breaking slightly. "I need help," she says. "I left this morning. I don't know what to do next." The woman on the other end responds with warmth, steady and reassuring, telling her she is brave, she is safe, she has options, she is not alone. Elise listens, tears slipping down her cheeks silently as the voice guides her gently, offering steps, connections, and a place she can go today, a safe space. When the call ends, Elise remains on the bench, breathing slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle around her. She feels lighter, yet anchored, held by something she cannot name. She wipes her face, stands, and begins walking toward the address the woman gave her. She walks slowly, but with purpose, each step building strength she never realized lived inside her. The city is bright now, fully awake, sunlight spilling across sidewalks, warming the pavement, warming her skin. She passes storefronts, cafes, apartments, and with each passing moment, she feels layers of fear peeling away, revealing the possibility of a life she has yet to imagine. She reaches the building, a small community center with wide windows and a painted sign that reads, "We see you." She hesitates at the door, her hand hovering over the handle. Then she whispers again the words that have been her silent anchor, "You are still here," and she pushes the door open, stepping into the first room of the rest of her life. The air inside the center feels different from the world outside, as if someone has woven safety into the walls themselves. It is quiet, but not silent, warm, but not stifling, the kind of quiet that lets a person breathe, the kind of warmth that says you do not need to be afraid here. Elise steps inside, letting the door fall gently closed behind her. She stands still for a moment, adjusting to the unfamiliar feeling of being somewhere meant to help, not harm. She looks around and sees soft colors, calm lighting, a small table with tea, a basket of blankets, and a wall of handwritten notes pinned by women who have walked this path before her, each note filled with words of courage, healing, and hope, written by hands that once trembled just like hers. A woman appears from the hallway, her voice soft and welcoming. She introduces herself as Mara and gestures to a nearby chair, inviting Elise to sit. Elise hesitates, unsure whether her body will allow her to relax, but something in Mara's eyes feels steady and kind. So she sits slowly, hands folded tightly in her lap. Mara asks gentle questions, not prying, but guiding, giving Elise room to speak. When she is ready, Elise tries to respond, but the words come out in pieces at first, thin, fragile strands of truth, but Mara listens without interruption, without judgment, without the slightest hint of impatience, and slowly Elise finds herself speaking in full sentences, then full memories, then full emotions. She tells Mara about the nights she hid in the bathroom listening to the sound of footsteps outside the door. She tells her about the way she learned to breathe quietly, sleep lightly, speak softly, as if trying to shrink into invisibility. She describes the early days when love felt warm, and the slow shift when warmth turned into control. She speaks of the way fear became routine, and how survival became her only instinct. Tears fall, but she does not wipe them away. She lets them fall freely like rain. Washing away years of silence, Mara listens with a steady presence, offering tissues, tea, and small gentle acknowledgments that make Elise feel seen in a way she never has before. When Elise finishes, Mara explains the next steps softly, carefully. She tells her about emergency accommodation resources, legal options, support groups, and counseling. But more importantly, she tells her something Elise has never truly believed until now, that she is brave, that leaving was not weakness, but power, that she has taken the first and hardest step toward rebuilding a life she deserves to live. Elise feels the words settle into her chest like small stones of truth, grounding her in the present, reminding her she is not dreaming, this is real, she is safe. Mara guides her down the hallway to a small room where Elise can rest for a while, a room with clean sheets, soft pillows, and a window overlooking a courtyard filled with trees and quiet corners. It is simple, but to Elise it feels like a luxury, the kind of peace she thought she would never feel again. She sits on the bed, running her fingertips across the blanket, marveling at the softness, as if it is the first gentle thing she has touched in years. After a while, she lies down, letting her body sink into the mattress, her muscles unclenching bit by bit, her eyes closing, not from fear, but from exhaustion that finally has permission to release her. She sleeps for hours uninterrupted, safe, held by silence and warmth. When she wakes, the sun has shifted, casting golden light across the room. She stretches slowly, feeling the ache of old tension loosening. She stands, walks to the window, and watches leaves swaying softly. She breathes in deeply, realizing this is the first time in years she has slept without fear, without listening for footsteps, without preparing herself for chaos. She presses a hand to her heart and whispers again, "You are still here." This time the words feel like a victory. Later, she joins a small group session Mara invited her to attend. The room is cozy, filled with women of different ages, backgrounds, and stories, but all sharing one thing: the courage to start again. Elise sits quietly at first, listening to the sound of other voices. Voices trembling sometimes, but strong in their truth. She hears a woman speak about rebuilding confidence after decades of control, another talk about finding joy again in simple things, walking in the sun, drinking tea, reading without fear. She hears a young woman speak about learning to trust her own choices again after being told she was worthless. As Elise listens, she feels something shifting inside her, a sense of belonging, a sense of recognition, a feeling that she is not alone in her pain, not alone in her healing. The stories mirror parts of her own life, weaving a tapestry of shared strength. The women laugh at small things, cry at others, but every word feels honest, raw, real, and Elise feels gratitude swell within her, gratitude for their courage, for their presence, for the reminder that healing is not only possible, it is happening all around her. When it is her turn to speak, Elise hesitates, her voice catching in her throat, but the eyes around her are gentle, encouraging. She takes a slow breath and begins speaking softly, haltingly, then with growing steadiness. She shares pieces of her story, not all of it, not yet, but enough to release some of the weight she has carried alone for too long. The women nod, offering quiet affirmations, and in their listening, Elise feels a sense of safety she has never known. After the session, one of the women, named Roslyn, approaches her, offering a small smile, the kind that feels sincere and warm. Roslyn tells her she reminds her of herself when she first came through these doors, afraid, uncertain, but strong underneath it all, stronger than she ever realized. Elise feels her eyes well with tears at the simple kindness. She nods, unable to speak, and Roslyn squeezes her hand lightly before walking away. Elise spends the rest of the day exploring the center, reading the pamphlets on the wall and learning about the programs available: support groups, therapy workshops, skill-building sessions, even creative expression classes where survivors paint, draw, write, or sculpt their journeys into something tangible, something beautiful. She walks through the halls, slowly absorbing the atmosphere of quiet resilience that fills every room. She sees women talking softly to each other, sipping tea, sharing stories of Small victories like sleeping through the night or going outside without fear or applying for jobs. Elise realizes each victory, however small, is monumental, every one a step toward reclaiming a life that was nearly lost. By evening, she returns to her room, opening the window to let the soft night breeze drift in. She sits on the bed looking around this simple, safe space, and she feels something she is almost afraid to name: hope. It arrives quietly, gently, not as a burst, but as a slow warmth. Blooming in her chest, she thinks about the future, not with dread, but with cautious optimism. She imagines days where she can breathe freely, nights where she can sleep without tension, mornings where she wakes without fear. She imagines laughter, joy, connection, independence. She imagines a life built on her own choices, her own strength, her own voice. She lies down and closes her eyes, letting the sound of distant city traffic and rustling leaves soothe her. She whispers, "Once more you are still here," and for the first time the words are not a reminder, they are a promise. Morning arrives slowly, with a pale light spilling through the window, painting the room in soft gold. Elise wakes with a calm she barely recognizes, a stillness inside her that feels tender and fragile, like a new beginning stretching its wings. She sits up quietly, listening to the gentle hum of the center, the distant footsteps, the faint voices, the rustling of papers somewhere down the hall. It does not sound like danger, it sounds like life moving at a gentle pace, something she has long forgotten. She rises and walks to the bathroom, letting cool water run over her hands, then splashing it onto her face. Feeling its clarity awaken her senses, she studies her reflection for a long moment. The faint, bruised shadows of old fear still linger in her eyes, but something new appears too, a softness, a spark, a whisper of strength that had been buried for years. She touches the edge of the mirror lightly, as if greeting a version of herself she is just beginning to meet. After a small breakfast in the communal kitchen where a few women offer warm smiles, Elise joins Mara for a one-on-one session. Mara sits with the same calm presence, wearing a soft sweater and kind eyes. She asks Elise gently if she slept well, and Elise nods, feeling strangely proud of the simple answer. Mara begins guiding her through grounding exercises, slow breaths, slow movements, helping her reconnect with her body in safe, quiet ways. Elise follows each instruction, carefully feeling the resistance in her chest gradually easing. She pays attention to her heartbeat, to the steadiness of her breath, to the quiet around her, all small reminders that she is alive, she is healing, she is safe. Mara then introduces an activity, something Elise has never tried: journaling, not just writing, but exploring the thoughts she has never said aloud. Mara hands her a simple notebook with blank pages, each one offering a space for untold truths. Elise holds it as if it is fragile, her fingers tracing the edges of the cover. She has not written freely in years. Every word she spoke was monitored, judged, twisted into something else. But here in this quiet room, she can write for herself and only herself. Elise begins slowly, the pen trembling between her fingers, the first lines uneven, hesitant, but she keeps going. She writes about the moment she decided to leave, the way her hands shook as she unlocked the door, the way her heart hammered like a wild drum. She writes about the sound of her own footsteps as she ran down the stairs, the cold air burning her lungs, the fear and the determination fighting inside her. She writes until the page fills, then turns to another, feeling something inside her loosen with each word she releases. When she finishes, she closes the notebook with a soft exhale. Mara does not read the pages, but simply nods, acknowledging the courage it took to put those memories onto paper. Elise feels a quiet relief knowing her story exists somewhere outside her mind, no longer trapped, no longer hidden. Later in the day, Elise joins a creative healing workshop, the room filled with bright colors, canvases, brushes, and gentle music playing from a small speaker. The instructor, a woman named Leora, greets everyone with warmth and encourages them to express their emotions through color and movement. Elise sits before a blank canvas, feeling unsure. She has never painted before, but Leora reminds her that this is not about skill or perfection, it is about releasing what her heart has held for too long. Elise takes a brush, dips it into soft hues, and begins moving it across the canvas, her strokes shaky at first, then bolder. She paints lines that curve, then break, then rise again. She paints the colors she feels inside, deep blues and soft whites, hints of gold and warm earth tones. As she paints, she feels memories flicker behind her eyes, moments of pain, moments of loneliness, moments of longing, but also moments of survival, small acts of bravery she never recognized as bravery until now. The painting becomes a map of her emotions shifting and flowing without words. When she finishes, she steps back and stares at the image, unsure how to name it, but knowing it feels honest. Leora walks over, offering a small smile, and tells her it is beautiful even if it is raw, even if it is incomplete. Beauty lives in the truth of it. Elise feels a warmth bloom in her chest, a rare feeling of pride. Later in the courtyard, Elise finds a quiet bench beneath a large tree. She sits, letting the gentle breeze brush against her skin, watching leaves flutter above her, sunlight catching on their edges. She breathes deeply, feeling a new sense of presence. She hears distant laughter coming from the kitchen windows, and suddenly she realizes she cannot remember the last time she heard laughter. Without flinching, she closes her eyes and lets the sound wash over her, letting herself believe it is safe to enjoy. Something simple, something light. A woman named Harper approaches slowly, asking if she can sit. Elise nods and Harper settles beside her, holding a mug of herbal tea. Harper shares pieces of her story, soft and steady, how she left with only a backpack, how she hid in a bus station for 3 hours, trying to gather the courage to reach out for help, how she spent her first night at the center crying from relief instead of fear. Their stories are different, but their pain is familiar, and their courage intertwines silently between them. Elise begins sharing too, not heavily, not with the weight of trauma, but softly, gently. She speaks about the way she is learning to breathe again, how waking up here feels like stepping into a world she forgot existed, how she is terrified of the future, but also curious for the first time in years. Harper listens with kind eyes, nodding, understanding every unspoken fear. They sit together in silence for a while, letting their shared understanding fill the space. As afternoon turns into evening, Elise attends a life skills session, the room filled with whiteboards, notebooks, and soft encouragement. The facilitator discusses financial independence, job readiness, and building personal boundaries, topics Elise has not allowed herself to imagine for a long time, but as she listens, she begins to feel something stir inside her, a question, a possibility. What could her life look like beyond survival? What could she build if she had the chance? She imagines herself working somewhere peaceful, helping others, maybe studying something she once loved, maybe discovering passions she never had the freedom to explore. She imagines a small apartment with plants by the window, a desk with her notebook, soft blankets, a bookshelf filled with stories of women who rose from their wounds. She imagines being part of the world, not hiding from it. By the time the session ends, Elise feels a quiet determination humming beneath her ribs, subtle but steady, the beginning of hope evolving into purpose. She walks back to her room slowly, her steps no longer weighed down by fear, but guided by something lighter, something she is beginning to trust. Inside the room, she sits on the bed, opening her notebook again. She writes about the day, the exercises, the conversations, the painting, the thoughts she dared to dream. She writes about how healing does not feel like she imagined it would, not sudden, not sharp, but slow, soft, gradual, like dawn spreading across the horizon. She writes until her hand aches, then closes the notebook, resting it beside her. Night settles gently over the center. Elise curls beneath the blanket, feeling a comfort that surprises her. She whispers a small promise into the quiet, I will keep going, and for the first time, she believes she can. A pale silver light stretches across the sky as dawn returns, and Elise wakes to the soft murmur of the world beyond her window. She sits up slowly, feeling the gentle glow of morning touch her face, and for a moment she simply breathes, letting the newness of this day settle into her bones. She rises and moves quietly across the room, slipping into a sweater and tying her hair back, still marveling at how it feels to move without fear of footsteps behind her. The hallways are calm, bathed in warm morning light. She walks toward the kitchen, where the rich scent of herbal tea and warm porridge drifts through the air. A few women are already seated, sharing soft conversation and warm smiles. Elise prepares herself a small bowl and sits at the corner of the table, listening to the quiet sounds of spoons clinking, the kettle steaming, the distant hum of a vacuum cleaning somewhere down the hall. Nothing here is sharp, nothing threatens her. It is all simple, peaceful, almost sacred. After breakfast, Mara invites Elise into a group session, the circle of chairs arranged neatly in a sunlit room. Elise sits cautiously, her hands folded in her lap, as the other women settle in. Mara begins with gentle words, reminding them this is a place for honesty, compassion, and breathing room. Each woman takes turns sharing parts of her journey. Some stories tremble with pain, others steady with determination. Elise listens, absorbing the courage woven into each voice. When her turn arrives, her heartbeat quickens, but she lifts her eyes, meeting the kindness of the group. She speaks softly, sharing how she has spent years learning to blend into the shadows, how silence had become her armor, how she is only now discovering the shape of her own voice. The women nod their support, filling the room with a warmth that steadies her. After the session, Elise walks to the small library tucked in a quiet corner of the building. Rows of shelves filled with books of healing, empowerment, memoirs of women who rose from darkness and built lives of strength. She runs her fingers along the spines, reading the names, the titles, each one carrying someone's truth. She selects a book about rebuilding identity after trauma, sits near the window, and begins reading, sunlight pouring gently over the pages. As she reads, she feels something resonate deep inside, every line echoing pieces of her own story, reminding her that healing is not a straight path, but a winding journey with setbacks and victories and tender beginnings. She reads until the words blur, then closes the book, pressing it lightly against her chest, the weight of it grounding her in the present moment. Leora finds her in the library later and invites her to an afternoon creative circle. Elise agrees, grateful for the distraction. She enters a room filled with soft fabrics, beads, ribbons, and clay. The women gather around a large table, each working on their own piece. Elise chooses a small block of clay, cool and smooth in her hands. She begins shaping it without overthinking, letting her fingers guide her. She forms a small abstract figure, something that resembles a rising shape, fragile yet determined. As she molds the clay, her mind wanders to memories she rarely touches. The night she first realized her spirit was breaking, the moment she felt her identity dissolving under someone else's control, the fear that swallowed her each time she imagined leaving, and the courage that surged through her when she finally stepped into the unknown. She presses her thumb gently into the clay, making small indentations like marks of the journey she has survived. One of the women beside her, a quiet, soft-spoken woman named Serafina, glances at the clay figure and whispers, "It looks like a soul standing back up." Elise feels her chest tighten with emotion, surprised by how deeply the words touch her. She nods softly, unable to speak for a moment. She places the sculpture aside, letting it dry, knowing it holds pieces of her she is just beginning to understand. Later in the afternoon, Elise meets with Mara again for a counseling session. They sit in the same quiet room, sunlight filtering through sheer curtains. Mara asks Elise to talk about the first moment she realized she deserved more than fear, more than pain. Elise thinks back, her voice soft as she begins describing a night she sat alone in the dark, feeling her heart breaking in a way she had never felt before. She recalls whispering to herself that she could not live another day like that. Mara listens with deep compassion, guiding her gently through the emotions that rise. Mara then asks her a question that lingers in the air like a soft challenge: "Who do you want to become?" Elise sits silently for a long moment, the question echoing in her mind. She has spent so long surviving, she never imagined becoming anything. She thinks of her journal, her painting, her clay figure, all small signs of a self slowly being reborn. She finally whispers, "I want to become someone who knows her own strength." Mara smiles warmly and tells her that she is already on that path. After the session, Elise steps outside into the courtyard, letting the cool air wash over her. The sky above is a soft shade of blue, streaked with drifting clouds. She walks slowly along the garden path, feeling gravel crunch under her shoes. The world seems wide and calm, and she realizes she is beginning to feel connected to something beyond fear, to the earth, to the sky, to the quiet pulse of life moving around her. She sits beneath a tall tree, listening to birds singing above her, their voices light and fluttering. She closes her eyes, letting the breeze brush against her skin. The wind feels like a whisper, a gentle promise of change. She opens her notebook and begins writing, not about the past, but about the future, her words flowing slowly, describing the person she hopes to become: strong, compassionate, free. She writes about learning new skills, building confidence, creating a life that feels like home. She writes until her hand aches, then rests the notebook on her lap, feeling lighter, somehow fuller. Evening approaches, quietly, soft shadows stretching across the courtyard. Elise joins the women for dinner, the atmosphere warm and relaxed. Someone plays gentle music from their phone, creating a soft background hum. Conversations flow easily, laughter rises in small waves. Elise listens, smiling to herself, recognizing how comforting it feels to belong somewhere, even temporarily. She helps clear the table afterward, rinsing dishes, stacking utensils, feeling grateful for simple tasks that make her feel useful, connected, human. As night settles, Elise returns to her room. She places the dried clay figure on her bedside table, its uneven shape catching the warm glow of the lamp. She touches it lightly, feeling a strange tenderness toward it. It is imperfect, but it is hers, a symbol of this new chapter. She crawls beneath the blanket, letting herself sink into the softness, the safety. She whispers a quiet promise into the silence. I am learning who I am, and I will not stop. For the first night in years, she falls asleep with hope resting gently beside her. The morning arrives with a quiet golden glow, and Elise wakes feeling a strange calm in her chest, a feeling that feels both foreign and familiar, like something she once knew long before the years of fear. She sits up slowly, brushing her fingers over the small clay figure beside her, letting its presence ground her before stepping into the day. She dresses and walks toward the kitchen, where soft voices drift through the hallway. She smiles gently at the familiar faces gathered around the table, women who once looked fragile, now glowing with new quiet strength. Harper lifts her mug in greeting, and Elise settles beside her, feeling the warmth of the moment seep into her bones. After breakfast, the center announces a workshop led by a guest speaker, a woman named Dr. Rowan, who specializes in trauma recovery and empowerment. Elise hesitates, unsure if she is ready, but Harper nudges her warmly, and together they walk to the sunlit meeting room, chairs arranged neatly in a semicircle. Dr. Rowan begins, speaking with a voice calm like water, guiding them through the science of healing, how trauma reshapes the mind, how survival can become a learned pattern, how the body carries stories long after the danger has passed. Elise listens, absorbing every word, her heartbeat steady, her breath slow. She feels seen in a way she rarely has, understood in a way she never dared believe was real. When the session shifts into an activity, Dr. Rowan asks each woman to write a letter to her younger self, a letter filled with compassion, reassurance, and truth. Elise sits for a long while, her pen hovering above the page, before she finally begins writing. Dear little one, you were never weak. You were never to blame. And one day you will walk away, and you will rise. The words spill gently across the page, not rushed, not forced, but steady like a river finding its way. She imagines her younger self, a girl with soft eyes and big dreams, someone who once believed the world was safe. She writes to her with tenderness, promising her safety, promising her growth, promising her that life will not end in darkness. Elise feels her throat tighten with emotion, but she keeps writing until the page is full. When the session ends, she folds the letter, carefully placing it inside her notebook like a quiet treasure she wants to protect. Later, Elise joins Harper for a walk through the small town near the center, their first supervised outing. The world outside feels larger than she remembers. Cars hum softly down the road, people pass by chatting, carrying shopping bags, sipping coffee. None of them know the battles Harper and Elise carry inside, and somehow that anonymity feels comforting, freeing. They stop at a small park with a fountain in the center, water dancing in soft arc sunlight, catching on each droplet. Elise sits on a bench, watching the rhythm of the water, feeling its movement echo something inside her. Harper talks about her plans, about enrolling in an online course, about finding a small job, about wanting to rebuild life slowly and carefully. Elise listens, admiring the bravery threaded through her words. Harper then asks Elise what she wants to do after leaving the center. Elise feels the question settle heavily in her mind. She looks at the rippling water and lets her thoughts wander. She imagines studying something meaningful, maybe psychology, maybe social work, maybe advocacy. She imagines working with women who carry stories like hers. She imagines holding out her hand to someone standing in the doorway of their own impossible choice, whispering, "You are not alone." But she is afraid of saying her dreams aloud. They feel too big, too bright, too fragile. Harper squeezes her hand gently and whispers, "You are allowed to want more than survival." Elise breathes deeply, letting the truth seep in slowly. On their way back to the center, they pass a bookstore, its window filled with titles about resilience, healing, and strength. Drawn to it, Elise steps closer. One particular book catches her eye, a memoir written by a woman who rebuilt her life after years of violence. Elise stares at the cover, feeling a quiet pull inside. Harper encourages her to buy it, and Elise hesitates before finally stepping inside the small shop. The smell of paper and ink wraps around her like something comforting. She pays for the book with trembling hands, not because she is unsure, but because she has rarely chosen something solely for herself. The simple act feels powerful. She holds the book close as they walk back, sunlight warming the top of her head, the soft hum of life surrounding her. When they return, Elise heads to the library again, settling into her favorite quiet corner. She opens the new book, reading the author's words with reverence, each sentence echoing pieces of her own journey. She turns page after page, losing herself in the story of a woman who walked through fire and found her way to purpose. Elise feels something shift inside, like a locked door slowly creaking open. Hours pass quietly until Mara stops by asking if Elise is ready for her afternoon session. Elise nods, gently following her into the familiar room. Mara asks about her outing, about the book, about the moments that felt heavy and the moments that felt light. Elise talks softly and Mara listens carefully, each sentence helping Elise stitch together her growing sense of self. Mara then guides her through a visualization and exercise in imagining her future, a safe future, a hopeful future. Elise closes her eyes, breathing deeply, letting her mind paint a new life. She sees a small apartment with soft yellow curtains. She sees herself at a desk, studying, surrounded by books. She sees herself speaking to a room of women, offering comfort, guidance, understanding. She sees herself laughing freely with friends. She sees herself waking up each morning with peace instead of dread. The image feels almost too beautiful, but she holds onto it, letting it expand inside her chest. Mara tells her gently that healing begins when the future stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a possibility. Elise opens her eyes slowly, a warmth blooming in her ribcage. That evening, the center hosts a quiet gathering in the courtyard, small candles placed around the garden, creating little pockets of light. The women sit together, sharing warm drinks and soft stories, stories of pain, stories of rebuilding, stories of hope. Elise listens, deeply feeling connected to each voice, understanding that each woman here carries a different version of strength. Someone begins humming a gentle tune, and soon the women join in, their voices blending in soft harmony. Elise closes her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. It feels like a lullaby for wounded hearts, like a song stitched from resilience. She lets herself lean into the moment, feeling held by the shared experience. When she returns to her room, she places her new book beside her clay figure, lighting her small bedside lamp. She opens her notebook and writes about the day, each memory, each feeling, each moment of bravery, no matter how small. She writes until the page fills with gentle truths about herself. Before sleeping, she whispers a quiet promise into the stillness, one that feels stronger than the promises before. I will not disappear, I will become. The night wraps around her, gently cradling her in the safety she is finally learning to trust. Morning arrives, slowly stretching soft rays across Elise's pillow. She wakes with a gentle awareness, as though her body is beginning to trust the rhythm of safety. Her breathing is steady, her heartbeat calm. She lies still for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the center, and something inside her whispers, "You are changing." She rises and moves through her morning routine with a quiet grace, brushing her hair, tying it back, washing her face, letting the coolness ground her. She glances at the clay figure and the book resting on her bedside table, both small symbols of her transformation. She touches them lightly before stepping out into the hall. The air carries the warm scent of tea and toasted bread drifting from the kitchen. Elise walks toward it, greeting the women who are already seated. The room glows with soft morning energy, and she feels a gentle sense of belonging settle into her chest. She sits with Harper, who smiles at her with an ease that feels like friendship, the kind built slowly through shared truth and shared healing. After breakfast, the center staff announces a series of skill-building classes starting that day, sessions designed to help women rebuild independence, confidence, and direction. Elise signs up for several, her name written carefully on the sheet, her pen steady with purpose. She feels something tighten in her chest, excitement and fear weaving together, but this time the fear does not overpower the hope. The first class is communication skills, led by a warm-voiced counselor named Nadia. Elise enters the room, noticing small notepads placed on each chair. She sits near the window, sunlight warming her shoulder as Nadia begins speaking about reclaiming one's voice, about the courage required to speak truth after years of being silenced. Elise listens deeply, letting the words settle into her. The class practices gentle exercises from reading affirmations aloud to expressing preferences to setting boundaries. Elise feels her throat tremble as she speaks small sentences, but each word feels like a step towards something truer, something stronger. Her voice is quiet yet steady, and Nadia nods with a reassuring smile that tells her, "You are doing beautifully." After the session, Elise steps outside into the courtyard, needing fresh air to let her feelings settle. She walks the small stone path, letting her fingers glide over the rosemary and lavender growing along the edges. The scent rises in soft waves, calming her body. She sits beneath the tree, breathing slowly, letting her mind rest. Soon she is joined by Serafina, who settles on the grass beside her. They talk softly about the class, about how strange it feels to practice speaking when silence used to be the only safe choice. Elise admits that she fears using her voice, still that she fears saying too much or not enough. Serafina shares her own worries, reminding Elise that healing is not about perfection, but about learning to trust her truth again. Their conversation unfolds with gentle honesty, leaving Elise feeling lighter than before. After lunch, the second class begins financial literacy, something Elise once believed she would never be able to handle. She sits with a small group as the facilitator explains budgeting, managing expenses, opening a bank account. Steps that once felt overwhelming now appear clear and achievable. Elise takes notes carefully, her hands steady as she learns the foundations of independence, each new piece of information planting itself like a seed inside her. When the class ends, she finds herself imagining the day she will open her own account, the day she will earn her own income, the day she will make decisions guided not by fear, but by freedom. She breathes in slowly, letting the vision root itself deeper. In the afternoon, Mara invites Elise for their regular session. They sit in the quiet room, sunlight making gentle patterns across the carpet. Mara asks her how she is feeling about the classes, and Elise shares her thoughts openly. She talks about her fear of stepping into a world she has been kept away from for so long, but she also talks about how each new lesson feels like a small doorway opening. Mara listens, smiling softly before telling her that this is how healing begins, through the slow, steady return of choice. Mara then guides Elise through a grounding exercise, encouraging her to name the parts of herself she is rediscovering. Elise closes her eyes, breathing deeply before whispering, "I am patient, I am learning, I am resilient, I am worthy," each word emerging softly but with deep sincerity. Mara nods and says those truths will guide you long after you leave this place. Later, Elise moves to the art room, drawn by the quiet comfort of creativity. Leora greets her warmly, inviting her to continue exploring her emotions through color. Elise chooses a fresh canvas, dipping her brush into a shade of soft gold. She begins painting slow, sweeping lines that rise gently across the canvas. She adds deep blues, light pinks, faint greens, colors that feel like a map of her rediscovery. The painting forms itself in delicate layers, like chapters of a story she is still learning to tell. As she paints, memories drift into her mind, memories of the girl she once was, the girl who loved reading by the window, the girl who dreamed of studying, the girl who believed she had something to offer the world. She paints her slowly, letting each stroke bring her closer to the self she lost, the self she is finding again. When she finishes, she steps back, heart beating with a tender pride. "This is who I am becoming." Later in the courtyard, Harper and Serafina join her for a quiet conversation. They talk about their dreams, about courses they want to take, books they want to read, places they want to see. Elise listens, feeling a blooming sense of possibility. She shares her own hope softly that she may one day study psychology to help other women heal. Harper squeezes her hand with encouragement, telling her her voice would change lives. Evening arrives gently, the sky painted in pale hues as the women gather in the dining room, laughter drifting between them like soft music. Elise feels herself laughing too, not loudly, not boldly, but freely, and that freedom feels like a victory. After dinner, Elise walks to her room, arranging her notebook, her painting, and her book neatly on the table. She sits on her bed, opening the window, slightly letting in the cool evening air. She breathes deeply, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She takes her notebook and begins writing about the day, each moment, each lesson, each small spark of confidence. She writes until her thoughts feel clear and her heart feels steady. Before she sleeps, she looks at the clay figure on her bedside table, the shape of it imperfect, but rising. She whispers a quiet promise into the stillness. "I am not who I was, I am who I am becoming." And with that, she drifts into sleep, wrapped in a sense of belonging and quiet courage, the night holding her gently as though the world is slowly opening its doors to her once more. The morning sunlight filters softly through Elise's window, and she wakes with a quiet anticipation, a feeling that today carries a subtle weight, a gentle momentum. She rises slowly, letting the calm of the center surround her. The air smells of fresh coffee and soft-baked bread. She stretches and feels the tension of old fears loosen in her muscles, as if her body itself is learning that it can trust again. She moves through the hallways greeting the women. She has grown familiar with smiles and gentle nods exchanged effortlessly. She arrives at the breakfast table where Harper waits. With a warm mug in her hands, they talk softly about yesterday, about the lessons learned, the victories small and tender that often go unnoticed, but are monumental in the quiet rhythm of their days. After breakfast, Mara invites Elise for a reflection session, one designed to look forward into the months ahead. She sits with her hands folded as Mara speaks of vision building, goal setting, and imagining life beyond the center. Elise feels a rush of nervous excitement. She has never been asked to consider such things openly before. She has survived for so long she has not had the space to dream. Mara guides her gently, asking her to imagine where she sees herself in 6 months, a year, 3 years. Elise closes her eyes and breathes deeply. She pictures a small apartment bathed in sunlight, a desk with notebooks, a bookshelf filled with stories of survival and hope. She imagines herself working with other women, sharing tools of resilience, offering guidance. She sees herself walking freely in the world, making choices with confidence, feeling proud of her accomplishments. She imagines laughter, friends, quiet nights, reading books, painting, and creating a life built by her hands for her heart. Her voice trembles as she shares these visions softly aloud. Mara listens with a quiet smile, encouraging her each word, each sentence to flow freely as if permission itself is given to dream. She feels a stirring inside her, a mixture of excitement and fear, the old fear whispering, "It is too much, it is too soon, it will not last." But she pushes it gently aside, focusing on the possibility, the promise, the power in claiming her own future. Later, Elise joins the women in the skill-building workshop, continuing her lessons in financial independence, leadership, and communication. She participates fully, letting her curiosity guide her, asking questions, taking notes, envisioning practical steps toward the life she has imagined. She feels a quiet pride in herself, in every small choice, every careful step toward agency, every word spoken aloud that is hers to speak. Afternoon comes, and with it the art workshop. Elise returns to her painting, her brush gliding softly over the canvas, tracing new shapes, new colors. She paints a rising figure stretching upward, reaching toward something luminous, her heart beating with the rhythm of creation. With the pulse of her emerging self, she layers blues and golds and soft whites, blending gently the chaos of her past with the light of her present and the warmth of the future she is building. After painting, she joins Harper and Serafina outside in the courtyard, the breeze rustling leaves above them, sunlight warming their skin. They speak about dreams, courses, books, friendships, adventures, and slowly Elise feels her imagination unfurling without fear, without hesitation, of freedom she has not known since she was a girl. She speaks softly about wanting to study psychology to help survivors. She shares her vision of opening a safe space for women in the future, each word carrying quiet determination. Evening approaches softly, the sky painted in shades of lavender and rose. The women gather in the courtyard for a reflection circle, candles flickering, small pockets of light illuminating faces tired but glowing with quiet accomplishment. Elise listens to each voice, speaking about challenges overcome, victories reclaimed, moments of bravery. She realizes that healing is not linear, but communal, each story echoing the others, forming a chorus of courage. She feels herself woven into that chorus, a part of something greater than fear, something enduring. When the gathering ends, Elise walks back to her room, each step deliberate, grounded, aware. She opens her notebook and begins writing, capturing the day, the lessons, the small triumphs, the emotions that feel like fragile birds settling in her chest. She writes about the visions she has claimed, about the person she is becoming, and the choices she is learning to make for herself. She writes until her hand aches, until her mind feels quiet and her heart steady. She places her notebook beside the clay figure on her bedside table, the figure now representing not just a single day of courage, but the accumulation of all the steps she has taken, each small act of bravery, each choice to trust herself, each whisper of hope. She repeats softly into the quiet before sleep, "I am becoming, I am strong, I am free." As she lays beneath the soft blankets, the night enfolding her, she reflects on the journey she has walked, from a life of fear and control to this moment of tentative freedom. She feels a quiet gratitude for the center, for Mara, for the women, for Harper, for the small acts of courage that together have built a sanctuary inside her heart. She closes her eyes, letting the stillness cradle her, letting the promise of tomorrow settle in her chest. Tomorrow she knows will bring more challenges, more steps, more lessons, but she also knows she has found the strength inside herself to meet them. She has discovered that survival was not the end of her story, but the beginning of a life. She now chooses a life. She now claims a life where she is no longer invisible, no longer silenced, but alive, radiant, and moving forward with courage. And as she drifts into sleep, the final whisper in her heart carries the truth that will guide her for the rest of her life. You are still here, and you will rise.